Hola, it's Beto here, your daily divinity coach, here for episode number 33 of my weekly series, Sunday Weekly Revival. If you're watching the recorded video, go ahead and feel free to fast forward a few minutes. I'm just going to tag some friends so let me just go ahead and tag some friends, see who's available right now, and we'll get an audience going for episode number 33 of my weekly series, Sunday Weekly Revival. So again, just tagging some friends so we can get an audience going for today's episode. So making some tags here. Hopefully we can get some people joining for episode number 33 of my weekly series, Sunday Weekly. Getting some friends, seeing if we can get a nice audience going here for episode number 33 of my weekly series, Sunday Weekly Revival. Just checking out, seeing who's live, and making sure we get those tags going. Very excited about this episode. Very excited to be here with you this morning. So I'm going to go ahead and just tag a few more people. Just want to see who we can get to join us. See, there's a few more people that are live today. So just now going through, seeing who's live, seeing who we can get to join us for today's episode. So just going to tag one or two more people, and then we'll go ahead and get started with this episode here. Okay. Excellent. Looks like we already got some folk. Emma Lou, shout out to Emma Lou. Emma Lou, it looks like you're throwing up hearts, so it sounds like my sound is working. So I'm going to go ahead and take these reading glasses off and start with my introduction. But if you're watching the recorded video and you've already heard my introduction before, please feel free to go ahead and fast forward a few minutes, and we'll get started with the content once we allow some more people to join, give some people time to join, especially those that we just tagged. So again, my name is Beto. I'm your daily divinity coach. We're here for episode number 33 of my weekly series, Sunday Weekly Revival. Episode number 33 is entitled The UFW, the 1968 Olympics or Summer Olympics, and the righteous intention of all-in spirituality. Today is Sunday, February 21st, 2021. So, again, my name is Beto. I'm your daily divinity coach. And just wanted to say a few words about myself before we get going with the content here. So just a brief introduction. And again, if you're watching the recorded video, feel free to fast forward a few minutes. I live here in Boston, originally from Mazatlan, from San Francisco. Came actually out here to Boston for graduate school, and this is now where I reside. I teach on three main subjects or topics. Number one being the law of attraction, or what I like to say, manifesting abundance, being limitless. And I actually was tutored in the law of attraction as a young boy, from the age of 10, by my mother, who's still my law of attraction coach. So she's still my law of attraction coach. She's the best coach for me. I also talk about liberation theology, manifesting justice, and I was introduced to liberation theology as an undergrad, as a university student, and that became my emphasis of study in divinity school and seminary. I actually came out here. That's what brought me out here to the Boston area. I went to Harvard University Divinity School, and again, liberation theology was my emphasis of study there. I'm a master of divinity. The third thing I talk about is manifesting immortality, or being ageless. And that was actually a culmination of a 10-year self-study. I don't have an immortality coach. Law of attraction coach, yes. Immortality coach, no. I didn't have any professors, in seminary and divinity school talking about immortality. It was just a self-study that culminated after 10 years with actually what I'm doing here on social media, professing my immortality, or professing being ageless, professing being truly created in the image of the divine. I produced these rubber bracelets. So I post every day about a paragraph here on Facebook, Daily Divinity Coaching. And then every Sunday I'm here live with you, starting at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I flip over here to be with you on Facebook Live, starting at 11:35 a.m. Eastern Standard Time and 8:35 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And I do this Sunday Weekly Revival every Sunday, with the exception of the first Sunday of the month. I'm still here with you live on the first Sunday of the month, but I do my monthly mailbag where I take your pre-submitted questions and provide thoughtful responses. So in addition to doing those things on social media, I also provide these, or I produce these rubber bracelets, and I know it's hard for you to see, but they're these rubber bracelets. There's a gray one that reads Manifest Justice, a blue one that reads Manifest Abundance, and a black one that reads Manifest Image. It's also free shipping. So if you haven't received your bracelets yet, again, they're free. Always free shipping in the U.S. and in North America and Europe, free shipping till the end of March. So please reach out. You can IM, DM me. You can even pull down an order form on our website, dailydivinitycoach.com. So introduction, we'll start with the introduction. So first of all, I want to say that our prayers are with Texas. I understand that and I understand this from both media, but also family and friends. I have a lot of family and friends in Texas. The Texas power grid failed this week during a brutal winter storm. If you haven't already heard, there were blackouts, power outages. People suffered from lack of heat. There's been water and gasoline shortages. So just want to make sure that it's stated that my prayers have been and are with everybody there in Texas. Not just my family and friends, but everybody. It's tragic what took place this week with the failure of the power grid and people, not having heat during a brutal winter storm, water and gasoline shortages. So I want to make sure I stated that. Also wanted to explain a little bit about all-in spirituality. So I've been, working to try and find a catchphrase for everything I talked about, right? Manifesting immortality, manifesting abundance, manifesting justice. I've been looking for a catchphrase, and so I came up with all-in spirituality. It's a fun phrase, right? All-in spirituality. And what I mean by this is that we understand, we believe, we're all in with the belief that we are created in the image of the divine, making us right? It's acronym, ALL. A, ageless, L, liberated, and L, limitless. So that's what I mean by all-in spirituality. We truly believe we're created in the image of the divine to be ageless, liberated, and limitless. I'm going to start by talking about the UFW, and then we'll get into the 68 Olympics. But first, before I start talking about the UFW, I wanted to give some perspective give my perspective from why this is important to me. My grandparents. When my grandparents first completed the sacred four-directional migration, when they left modern-day Mexico and returned to the ancestral homeland, our ancestral homeland of the Mexica Azteca, the Toltec, the Maya, the Hopi, they actually worked in the fields. They worked as farm workers. And they never let me or us forget it, right? Because they were proud of how hard they worked and, the sacrifices they made for us. And I'll always remember when I right down the street here, when I graduated Harvard University Divinity School, my grandmother was there front and center in the front row at the graduation ceremony, and just beaming, right? Her big smile. And just through her smile, she was reminding me, of that the completion of that migration, and the sacrifices that they made, so that we could all be here, right, at this ceremony celebrating my graduation from Harvard University Divinity School, because it was an all-in, right? It was an all-in accomplishment. It wasn't just me, right? It wasn't just a personal accomplishment. That's ridiculous. I had generations of support. So wanted to make sure I get that out there. Not the least of which is because some of my family members, especially the younger generations, don't know that history of our family and, the completion of that migration and my grandparents working the fields, being farm workers before they settled in Los Angeles, before they settled in LA in California to raise a family, and then up to the San Francisco Bay Area where my grandfather got a job in a winery. Also wanted to note, as an undergrad in university, I did have the chance to hear Cesar Chavez, right, the co-founder of the United Farm Workers, along with Dolores Huerta. I did have an opportunity to hear him speak. He came to our university to speak, and I was just really struck by how genuine and humble, and really how just the righteousness, that I felt from him, because he dedicated his life, right, to the least of these, as the great teacher says, to the least of these, the poor, the oppressed. And it just came out, right? It came out. And that's why this episode is entitled The Righteous Intention of All in Spirituality, because I believe the all in spirituality that I teach, it's not about, people think, you talk about immortality, you talk about agelessness, is that about ego? Is it about vanity? No, it's about righteous intention. It's about help liberate the least of these, the poor, the oppressed. Because, here in the fourth world right now, the fifth world's emerging, but in the fourth world, we're oppressed because the currency, right? The man-made dominant currency. And if we can manifest immortality, if we can live into who we are, created in the image of the divine, to be ageless, we can flip that currency from the man-made currency, right, the dollar bills and all that stuff, the euro, to time eternal. And but it comes through righteous intention. It's not about ego, vanity. It might be for the Silicon Valley billionaires who are spending millions of their own money, investing billions of other people's money into immortality technology to try and reverse the negative effects of aging. But it's not when it comes to all-in spirituality, so I want to make that clear. So the United Farm Workers, otherwise known as the UFW, is a labor union of farm workers in the U.S. And it actually originated from the merger of two workers' rights organizations. There's the AWOC, which stands for the Agricultural Working Organizing Committee, and that was led by the Filipino-American labor organizer, Larry Itliong. And forgive me if I'm mispronouncing. I'm not fluent in Tagalog. But Larry Itliong, he led the AWOC, and they ended up merging with the National Farm Workers Association, the NFWA, which was led by the Chicana, Dolores Huerta, and the Chicano, Cesar Chavez. So how did that merger take place? Well, in 1965, Larry and others from the AWOC walked off the fields. They're working the fields. They walked off the fields, the farms of area table grape growers in Delano, California. I know Delano, very fond of Delano. I've done a lot of business in Delano, visited many times. So anyhow, they walked off the fields of these table grape growers in Delano. And what did they demand? They demanded, they wanted wages equal to federal minimum wage. They're really just asking for a 20-cent increase in their hourly pay. They're making $1.20 an hour, and they wanted federal minimum wage at that time was $1.40 an hour. So they walked off in protest, and they started what's known as the Delano Grape Strike. So a week after they walked off and they started this strike is when the NFWA, right, Dolores Huerta and Cesar Chavez, they joined this strike, and then later on, the two merged and they became the United Farm Workers. The AWOC and the NFWA merged. So this is the question that I asked, right? And I'm sure you're thinking it too. Why weren't farm workers guaranteed federal minimum wage? Well, in 1938, under the Federal Labor Standards Act, which guaranteed federal minimum wage, farm workers were left out. The reason? Racism. At that time in 1938, the majority of farm workers were African American. Fast forward, the majority of farm workers are Mexican or Latino. So they're purposely left out of the FLSA, which would have guaranteed that minimum wage. That was redressed. Later on, they were included in that legislation for minimum wage, but not for overtime pay. In California, that was redressed in 2016. Then California Governor Jerry Brown actually signed into law a bill that was authored by Lorena Gonzalez, Assemblywoman from San Diego, redressing the racist exclusion of farm workers from overtime pay. So, every hour after 40 hours, they would get time and a half. But the federal law still hasn't done that. In California they have, but in many states, farm workers aren't guaranteed overtime pay. That same California governor, Jerry Brown, so he was governor of California twice. He was governor in the 70s and then later on in the 2010s. In 1975, he signed into law the Agricultural Labor Relations Act, which gave farm workers the ability to, for collective bargaining, right, to join unions without fear of retaliation. But that still isn't national. The National Labor Relations Act of 1935 allowed employees to, form unions and without the fear of retaliation in collective bargaining. But again, farm workers were left out of that 1935 federal act. Why? Because of racism. At that time, the majority of farm workers were African American. Now they're Mexican or Latino. But California redressed that. But still, it hasn't been redressed in many states. So it's still work that still needs to be accomplished. Anyhow, so again, going back to the Delano grape boycott. So a week after the AWOC initiated this strike, Sister Dolores Huerta, Sister Chavez, the NFWA joined. That strike lasted 5 years. But in July 1970, the organizers, the farm workers that were striking, they emerged victorious. They won. So what happened during that strike? Well, one major thing is that there's a big push for education. So people became aware, and consumers started boycotting non-union grapes. So that put a lot of pressure on the table grape growers. Also, in 1968, in February of 1968, Cesar Chavez, right, the co-founder of the UFW with Dolores Huerta, he actually announced a hunger strike. And that brought national and international attention to the Delano grape strike, his hunger strike. So much so that one of their allies, Robert F. Kennedy, the brother of President John F. Kennedy, who was assassinated a few years before, he actually came out to support. He flew out to Delano, California to support his friend and ally, Sister Chavez, during the hunger strike. So fast forward to March 1968, Sister Chavez is almost a month into this hunger strike. He's lost 35 pounds. He's been without food for almost a month, lost 35 pounds, and doctors are now scared for his life. They're saying you're endangering your life if you continue this. So anyhow, Robert F. Kennedy's there with him. There's national attention, there's international attention, and Chavez decides to end the strike, right, for health reasons, for his life, to save his life. So those photos of Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy, and Cesar Chavez during the Delano grape strike together, or at the end of the hunger strike, they're iconic, right? If you Google them, they're iconic photos that we're taking. So anyhow, he ended the hunger strike in March 1968, and in July 1970, the strike was victorious. The farm workers, the organizers were victorious. They won that battle. So what I want to do right now is change directions, and we're going to talk about the 1968 Olympics, because there's another righteous act, right? Another righteous act that took place at the 68 Olympics. This 1968 Summer Olympics were held in Mexico, in Mexico City. It was the first time the Olympics were held in Latin America. And what took center stage during the Olympics, which lasted from October 12th to October 27th there in Mexico City, was a medal ceremony. The track and field men's 200-meter race, the medal ceremony for that race really took center stage. And even today, Time magazine says the photos from that medal ceremony are the most iconic photos taken in modern time. Unbelievable iconic photos. And matter of fact, when you Google the 68 Olympics, for me anyhow, that was like the first thing that emerged were those photos. So those photos, or that photo was of Tommy Smith, Tommy Smith won the gold. He was the gold medal sprinter and won the 200 meters there in Mexico City in the 68 Olympics, Summer Olympics. Peter Norman, he was from Australia. He won the silver medal. And John Carlos won the bronze medal. And they're all members of the Olympic Project for Human Rights. So all three decided to wear badges, human rights badges, while on the podium, right? Recognizing their membership in the Olympic Project for Human Rights. And that was a big deal because people didn't know they were going to do it, and it's like considered a protest and whatnot. Smith and Carlos, right, from the U.S. decided to take things a step further. And they actually showed up on the podium shoeless. They didn't have any shoes on. Instead, they wore black socks. And they said that the black socks represented black poverty, right? They wanted, it was a protest, it was a righteous act, right? In protest of black poverty in the United States, but also globally. So that's why they wore the black socks instead of having shoes on their feet. Smith and Carlos also lowered their head while the Star Spangled Banner played in protest of racial inequality, of what was going on in the U.S., the mistreatment of African Americans. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had recently been assassinated. Cities were burning in protest. There's a lot going on in the U.S. So John Carlos and Tommy Smith wanted to do their part, and this was their part, right? This protest. And so they lowered their heads, the Star Spangled Banner is playing, and they raised their fist, right, in unity with the Black Power movement, with the Civil Rights movement. Interestingly enough, if you look at those photos, Tommy Smith is raising his right hand, right, which was how it was supposed to be. That's typical of the salute. However, John Carlos has his left hand up. Why is that? And I always wondered this, but I didn't find out until I did the research for this show. And if you excuse me, I'm just going to take a sip of water real quick. So why does one guy have his right hand up and one guy have his left hand up? Well, what took place is they were getting ready for the ceremony, the medal ceremony, and they realized between them, Carlos and Smith, they only had one set of black gloves. So they kind of like freaked out a little bit. Peter Norman said, hey, don't worry about it. Why don't one of you take the right glove, right, the right black glove, and the other one take the left black glove. So Tommy Smith, being the gold medal winner, took the right, and John Carlos took the left. And that's why you see, one with the right fist up and one with the left fist instead of both of them having the right fist up. So what happened after this took place, right? The medal ceremony. Well, as they walked off, all three, Carlos, Smith, and Norman, were booed. The audience booed them. The IOC suspended Smith and Carlos from the U.S. Olympic team. They were banned from the Olympic Village. When they arrived back in the U.S., Smith and Carlos were subject to abuse. They received death threats. Their family received death threats. Norman was ostracized by the Australian media. He was reprimanded by the Australian Olympic authorities. And he was also left off the 1972 Olympic team, allegedly as punishment for his participation in what took place there during the medal ceremony. Fast forward through time, and in 2006, Smith and Carlos were actually, let me take a step back. So what happened is, they're seen more or less by a lot, not everybody, but by a lot as being heroes now, right? Smith, Carlos, and Norman. And in 2006, unfortunately, Peter Norman passed away. He passed away. But all along, right, from 68, 2006, the three of them remained friends, and Smith and Carlos were actually pallbearers at Norman's funeral. In 2008, Smith and Carlos were awarded the Arthur Ashe Courage Award during the ESPYs. So now they're recognized for their courage. Before they were booed, they received death threats. now they're recognized for their courage, because it was a courageous act, right? To stand in solidarity with the civil rights movement, with the Black Power movement, fighting for righteousness' sake, right? Calling attention to Black poverty, not just in the U.S. but beyond, right? Human rights. Then in 2012, the Australian House of Representatives, they actually issued a formal apology to Peter Norman posthumously. He had already passed away. And they said that was a moment of heroism and humility that advanced international awareness of racial inequality. And just recently, it was announced that they're going to erect a bronze statue in honor of Peter Norman back in Australia. So, these gentlemen who are athletes, medal winners, Olympians who are ostracized, because of their stand for civil rights, for human rights, fast forward decades now, and they're actually celebrated as heroes. And why is that? Why weren't they celebrated then, right, as heroes? Well, the establishment, feared, right? They feared change. They feared us, is what they did. They feared everyday people standing up. And that's why I talk about the righteous intention of all in spirituality. The powers of the fourth world, they fear what Toni Morrison said, right? Those of us who've been pressed to the margins, coming to the realization that the future is ours. The future is not in the hands of the Silicon Valley billionaires. The future is ours, right? We just need to come to the realization that we are all created in the image of the divine, to be liberated, to be limitless, right? To be ageless. We can flip that currency and help free the oppressed, free the poor, as the statement that Tommy Smith, Peter Norman, and John Carlos were making. So anyhow, the backdrop. So there's something else that was going on at that time during the Olympics. There was a backdrop, right, in Mexico. What was going on in Mexico? Well, 10 days, there's, a big event took place, a tragic event took place 10 days before the beginning of the Olympics there in Mexico City. So there's student movements. There's a student movement that is going on in Mexico amongst the university students. They're organizing. They were upset because the Olympics were coming to Mexico, and the Mexican government were using all these public funds, right? They're using all these public funds to erect Olympic facilities, funds that could be going to the betterment of the public good. And so they're upset about this, and they wanted change, right? They said that we don't want the Olympics. Queremos revolución. We want revolution. And so they had demands for more civil liberties, for more political liberties. They wanted equality, and they wanted an end to the PRI. The PRI was the dominant political party in Mexico at the time. They had governed Mexico for nearly 40 years, and they're seen as being authoritarian. And they wanted an end to the PRI. So they've been organizing. Meanwhile, the president of Mexico at that time had been trying to suppress the organizations. They've been planning people, right, in the movement, doing exactly what the FBI did up here in the U.S. and during the civil rights movement, and the Black Power movement, right, putting plants in and whatnot, and trying to disrupt and suppress. So anyhow, 10 days before the Olympics, on October 2nd, 1968, 10,000 people, approximately 10,000 people gathered at the Plaza de las Tres Culturas there in Mexico City. And the Mexican president, Gustavo Díaz Ordaz, wanted to suppress this rally, right, this protest, this meeting. And so he sent in 5,000 soldiers. He sent in the police, the military. There was 200 mini tanks. And it was tragic. Hundreds were killed. Over 1,000 were arrested. Many of the student leaders, they were kidnapped, they were tortured, they're killed, murdered. It's just a tragic event took place, and that was the backdrop to the '68 Olympics. So all these human rights violations. Just tragic day in Mexican history and world history. October 2nd, 1968. So I said at the beginning that I would come back to the farm workers, and that's what I want to do right now. So here's why everything that I talked about is topical, especially in regards to the farm workers. So just this week in Congress, the Democrats announced their version of U.S. President Joe Biden's immigration bill. And in this bill that they announced, farm workers would actually, if signed into law, farm workers would actually be eligible automatically to apply for green cards, right? For documented status. Undocumented farm workers would be able to apply and be eligible for green cards, for documented status. And it's a big deal, right? And then after 3 years, they would be able to apply for U.S. citizenship. And the last time anything like this, was signed into law was 1986. Then President Ronald Reagan signed a bill into law, and nearly 3 million were granted documented status. So it's a really big deal. All of this that I talked about is topical, and and it all revolves around righteous intention, right? Caring about the least of these, right? The great teacher always talked about the least of these, the poor, the oppressed, right? And getting behind them and wanting to free them from that oppression. Many of us come from that background, right? Many watching right now come from that background. They have that history, right, in our families, in our lineage, in our ancestry, and but we can do it, right? There's no reason this bill can't be passed. There's no reason we can't manifest. We can't bring about all-in spirituality, right? It's about that belief, about that all-in belief that we're created all in the image of the divine, to be ageless, to be liberated, to be limitless. So I'm going to go ahead and end here. I'm very grateful for you that are watching live, for those that will be watching the recorded video. Humbled, truly humbled, and grateful. It's such a pleasure to be able to offer these Sunday weekly revival episodes. It's a joy for me and a pleasure. So I hope you can join next week. I'm here every Sunday morning. Well, morning for me. I'm here every Sunday morning. And, I guess it's afternoon now. It's after 12. But hope you can join live again next week. If you missed any part of this episode, I will be posting the recorded video. And wherever you're at, if it's day or night, because I know I have people internationally watching, I wish you blessings. And again, my prayers are with all those in Texas. So I'm going to go ahead and put my reading glasses on now and go ahead and turn this off. But again, thank you so much, and may you have a blessed rest of your day. Bye-bye now.